consumed a little wine.
Definitely did that. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a little different this many years later. And that
Looks
many,
just a touch different.
well, having a little different experience with wine, where, you know, you're comparing church wine to the wines last time. And I haven't had different wines since then, and a different, I guess, taste for it. Yeah, it was fun.
You know what you're supposed to be looking for now.
Found it.
You know how to pretend to look for it.
Yeah, that's more like it. I would just shut up and nod. Yeah, a little swirl. Get a nose in there.
Yeah.
What kind of cheese is that? I'll take that one.
Right. Why doesn't this meat taste like meat? What am I eating? Drive into the redwood forest was pretty awesome. Pacific Coast Highway was beautiful. Yeah, it was really fun.
I just went through that. Oh, yeah.
If anybody's missing a charger, there was one left here after the last meeting.
I think it was here when we got here at the last meeting.
There, it was
Nobody claimed
USB-C.
It's been here a while.
Though. So.
Right, Brittany.
I'll say.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening. Do we have any additions to the agenda this evening?
Mayor, a couple of additions. I would like to put these under consent agenda, but I don't have any objection to putting them under new business either, or personnel. I'd like to add an extension for the recreation manager to keep Trey on board for a little bit while here while we try and figure out what we're going to do with that position. And then you have on your tables a grant application that Alan would like to submit to the Department of Health for a strategic plan for the Lennox ambulance. No cost to the city of Lennox if that is awarded.
So we have an extension for the rec manager and then a grant application for the ambulance. Are there any objections if we put that under consent agenda this evening?
I'd like to put them on new business.
Put them under new business? Any other?
Motion to approve as amended.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to add an extension for the rec manager and a grant application to be added to new business. So we have E and an F. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And motion carries. We will add that to new business. Okay. Any visitors to be heard this evening, please step up to the podium, state your name, address. Okay, seeing that there's none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Before we do, Nate, are there items you want to draw attention to, or council members that want to address anything in the consent agenda this evening?
Item F, Mayor and Council, we're just setting a special hearing or special assessment hearing date for Central Basin 4. Once that's set tonight, we'll get to work on sending out the notice to the property owners within, I think it has to be more than 10 days and not more than 20 days away from the public hearing, so we have a tight window to send that out. Got habitual violator status in there at the request of the code enforcement officer. tract, a new plat that's outside city limits, but within our platting jurisdiction, and then a special event permit that's fairly standard.
Any discussion, questions within council?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion?
Yes, on the 2024 flooding, FEMA's response appears to have been very well done on their end. But it's mentioned here to pursue some additional grants possibly for flooding mitigation in the
Yeah.
future. What is needed from us as a council to make sure that stays on track?
I think make sure that it stays on your radar and my radar. You know, there's always, 15 or 20 different balls in the air at any given time, so it's easy to let those go. I do have a reminder set up on my calendar every couple of weeks to take a look at that. And I did, within the past couple hours, talk with CCOG about the next planning or the next mitigation grant, which is next May. So
Okay.
it's gonna be next spring when our next availability for this is. There's any number of possibilities for what we should be applying for, depending on what the funding levels are.
Right.
So whether that's floodway acquisition, drainage acquisition, emergency storage at the plant, whatever it might be.
Any other discussion? Seeing that there's none, we'll do roll call. Welch?
Aye.
Bowers?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Doherty?
Aye.
Mauer?
Aye.
Swear?
Aye.
And motion carries to approve the consent agenda. On to 4 old business. First item is Department of Correction sewer connection. Nate, you have some information on here?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, not a lot to share tonight. Our discussions with Department of Corrections have continued. I've been working on a possible agreement should we get to that point. SARE has found the idea feasible, so now we're really at the point where DOC needs to decide whether to move forward with that idea or not. You'll have in your packets updated charts from Stockwell projecting future population increases against capacity. So that's included in your packet. Kyle's here tonight. He has discussed some possible H2S gas and odor controls with our chemical supplier. They were unable to join us tonight. They did provide information, and that's included in your packets as well, including a case study on the aerated lift station.
Can you elaborate what those last 2 images in the packet are? It shows the projected growth and
Yes.
where that lines up with the,
Um,
where it lines up with the capacity.
yeah, I was just, they're different growth rates. It's a projected growth rate of 3% versus the, I think we had 1% with the first.
So the image 1 is the original and
Yeah,
image
that's
2
the
is,
flatter growth rate.
okay.
And then the one where it shows it higher in what year is it, 2044, that's a 3% growth rate that we projected out at the request of last council meeting. And we failed to label it on there, so.
Have we received any additional information? I know we're investigating process changes to potentially increase that capacity per day. Do we have any?
We don't have a technical memo yet, no.
Is there any additional information from last meeting that we've gotten answers on that we didn't at that point?
Just that SARE found the plan feasible. It's the only thing I think that is.
Can you give a little light on this Parkland sanitary case study that you put in here of what that is telling us versus what we're doing?
Hello everyone. I reached out with Hawkins, the chemical supplier. He unfortunately couldn't be here, and I would really like him to be here, but he's got a lot more experience in this than I do. But essentially, that case study is some options that they implemented on some of their sanitary collection system to mitigate some of the H2S gas. As this being a force main, I don't know if that's gonna be such a viable option, since it's kind of like an aerated, kind of like a live well, you know, sandstone that's down there that creates, air to help, you know, break down any of the gases. But I think in this situation, if this does, happen, I think the chemical injection fee would probably be more feasible. But they did have good success with the aerators. I'm not sure in this particular situation it would work. So I wish Tim was here to speak more on that. But
You'd have to have some way, I mean, if there were another lift station halfway, for example, then it might be a more viable option.
exactly, right.
But that 10-mile force main, you're gonna have conditions in there that you'll be anaerobic, or could turn anaerobic in that time frame.
I'm not sure if it'll work in a force main.
Right.
That case study's kind of not set up for this.
Would that be best served at the facility?
I would assume so.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So before it travels its long distance, it's already been treated?
Right. When it gets to Lennox, if we were to go ahead with the plant improvements that we discussed, once it gets here, it would go to that mixing tank and it would be aerated there. We would control that gas.
Mhm.
Hopefully Hawkins will be present at
Yeah,
the next one.
I will continue to reach out to him.
Yeah, I guess how do we get comfortable that we're not gonna add a lot of negative smell to our community? That's one answer we need.
Mhm.
Well, can we talk to like the city of Sioux Falls? I mean, they have force mains that run from town out to between Sioux Falls and Brandon. I think they have Brandon mains that come to Sioux Falls. T comes to Sioux Falls now. I think Harrisburg maybe does too, or
I know T does. I know the
Harrisburg doesn't anymore.
Okay.
The Brandon one, I think, is their largest one, so that would be,
Do we know how long that one is?
I'm not sure.
But even, I mean, obviously it's gonna be shorter than what we're looking at, but even at that, they gotta have some experience with it, I would think.
Put that on the radar.
Mitch, I know you talked about image 1 and image 2 and the comparison there.
Yeah.
But on the collection system document, figure 2 talks through the population projections of 0.9% and then 1.25%. I just wanna make sure that, so this does not line up with the images. Cause the
So-
3%'s not on this graph.
Right, at the last meeting, there was just, I think Bill brought up just wanting to see what a 3% growth rate would look like, or just a larger growth rate. Cause we do base those trends off of the last, off of census data, and so it's probably off the last 10 years, maybe 20 years. And if you look at that, you had about a 1% growth rate over that time. Now, in the last 5 years, I'm sure you've had a bigger growth rate than that. So I think that's where that request kind of originated from. So I think what that's meant to do is kind of tell you, even at a 3% growth rate, which is an aggressive growth rate we feel, you would be reaching the capacity, the design capacity of the plant in that 2044.
So let's just say that we do have a 3% or higher growth rate. What would you recommend then? Do we wait until we get closer to 2044 and build up some of the cash that we're receiving, potentially receiving, and then expand at that time?
That's what I would think you'd do. And when we talk expansion, we're probably talking about adding a whole other cell. And that's a big expansion. There's gonna be things that you have to do along the way that you're just gonna have to do regardless. And those are some of the things that I think Kyle's brought up in the past. But when you get to a capacity expansion, a big expansion, I would go as long as you can before you have to do it.
But before 44, we're gonna have to basically replace the plant anyway, right?
We'll be adding-
It wouldn't replace it.
Adding another
Upgrade.
cell or whatever.
There's components in there that will be outsized and aged out, so those components will have to be updated.
But it'll have to almost be overhauled for the most part.
And when I think of like the concrete structure, that you want to
Yeah.
overhaul that, you know, you want to, that's a big expense.
But it's got, what, a 25-year life expectancy, and we're already, what are we now?
12, 13.
Those can be a lot of components, but again, the structure of it,
Yeah, that's,
that's,
There's mechanical.
last you for that.
right,
Mechanical equipment will need to be replaced, but not not the whole
Right.
plant will need to be rebuilt.
but that's a lot of dollars too, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
structurally, yeah, it's, other than the stuff that's corroded out.
Right.
But, you know, as you're talking, at what point do you pull the trigger on expansion as late as you can?
Yeah.
Because, again, those population projections can change in a 5-year period.
Yeah.
You know, if we were planning for an expansion 5 years ago versus now, it would look very different.
So as we talk about overflow and expansion, we toured, the council toured the wastewater treatment facility in Lennox last week, and I had asked the question, well, what happens if we get this huge rain, and where does that overflow go? And so I just want to get it out there too for the public, to explain a little bit about the overflow is at the plant. It's not necessarily where it's gonna be backing up into basements. And it's not the prison sewer, because that does not connect to the sewer within the community. And so I think it's important for people to kind of understand that too, that the overflow that we would see would be at the actual plant and not in town.
Is there any way to almost set up a timeline of costs up until that 2024? You mentioned there's some mechanical things, so does that mean that year 3 is gonna be 20 grand, at year 5 it's 100 grand? Like, is there any way to estimate, just so we can kind of plan out,
You could,
You know,
I mean,
we're gonna get this extra revenue, but how do we at least plan of how much of that we think is gonna take to
a depreciation schedule is probably what most people would do. I don't know that I haven't done that for you guys, if that's something you have generally started or.
It would have to be on our fixed asset schedule, so we would know what it depreciates by per year.
And I know we had talked about, I know we've already ordered some additional like backup valves, things like that, that are not huge ticket items, but they're not insignificant. You know, it'd be nice to kind of get a full picture of, here's what we think is gonna take to actually make this thing make sense.
Yeah, because those are kind of operating costs as you go, right? And one year you might spend a small amount on operating costs, and next year you might spend a bigger amount. And I think what we've been doing is just budgeting kind of an average amount every year. That's what most towns do, but we could certainly dial that in a little bit and help you guys depreciate those things out.
It'd be nice to understand how much excess from this revenue would we actually keep.
Sure.
And then, we know it's gonna cost more to maintain the plant, but is that half of that, is that 3/4 of that, is that 10% of it? I think understanding that's gonna be necessary.
Well, I'd like a side-by-side, one that we already have that shows our depreciation schedule, and the one that projects out with this extra volume and what we're looking at and what that amps up. It's huge if we have that knowledge.
Helps make a decision.
Well, at least paints a picture. I still don't feel like we've got nearly enough information to
No.
go in any direction.
I agree.
Either way, there's a lot of ambiguous stuff here. That we're talking generational things. That existing penitentiary in Sioux Falls was built when? That's how long we're looking at as a community to be married to this prison. And boy, do we need more information before I'm willing to jump into that generational relationship. How long are we obligated to stay on board with this plan is a thing I'd like to know an answer for. If we were to ever say yes, are we on the hook until they build another prison somewhere else and shut that one down? Is that a century? Is there a termination option? What are the qualifiers for that termination that protects us as a community? What if we see unforeseen growth in our community and no longer can handle the prison's wastewater? What's our out? I don't think T and Harrisburg saw the level of growth that they experienced and are suffering because of that. And if we don't account for that possibility, we put ourselves in a very weird spot. And married to something for a century is a very weird spot. So if you could get some answers on that.
What's that?
So we'll see what we can do.
I mean, the one thing we do know is it'll be pretty consistent, what we're getting, if we were to get that.
Predictable, yeah. You know, when we look at operational costs, we've gone with the same assumptions that Harrisburg had. That this would cost, you know, upwards of $250 a year. That's, I still think that's on the high side in terms of, you know, what it costs us to treat and what we'll need to increase for staffing. But I'd rather estimate high than low.
What's the amount we stand to lose if IM 28 passes? The projected tax?
140 a year.
140,000. I just wanted to see how that compared to, I know we'll be getting funding from the DOC should we move forward, and so that would take care of that amount.
Different account. but-
Yeah, it depends on, I mean, it'll be up to the council to determine what you wanna do, whether it's this council or a council 5 years in the future, what you want to do with whatever net excess we have. My recommendation would be to sock it away for new maintenance costs and the eventual expansions.
My thought was if we're losing money from IM 28, the additional funding from DOC would be helpful.
Backfill,
Right.
you could.
Another question to tack on the bills list that he gave you. I think we need some we would need some language to protect ourselves for an expansion, like if they're gonna add on so many beds to that prison, we have to have a say in if we're okay with that or not, taking on that additional volume.
I think some of that language existed in Harrisburg.
Well, there's an escalator on the cost, I think there was,
Yeah.
over a certain base level, and it was quite a bit more expensive.
Yeah.
Before we get too far into, I guess, looking at the contract and the language, I think it is imperative that we have input from the community, and I know Nate, you've talked about that coming up. That hasn't been.
Yes.
Okay, and just so that we can get different perspectives and understand, is there something else that we aren't thinking of that maybe we could get from community input and some Q&As as we're moving along the process instead of, waiting too late?
Yeah, we'll have an in-person, not us, Lennox Citizens Academy is hosting an in-person, I don't know if they call it a forum or Q&A next week, Wednesday, at Prosper, 7 o'clock, so.
Who's gonna be present there,
For,
aside from the folks from the academy? Citizens Academy?
whoever, it's open to the public, so.
So we're not gonna have any guest speakers or anything like we do sometimes for that.
No.
Do we wanna think about having Mitch or Kyle or other staff present?
Yes.
To be able to answer some of the technical questions?
Yeah, I mean, we can all go, but if we don't have answers, it's pretty tough for us to give
Right.
direct answers when we don't know.
Any other discussion with this agenda item? For Mitch or Kyle, anything else? Okay. Alright, thank you guys. There's no action on this agenda item.
Correct.
So going to the next item, B, ordinance 655, or 651, the fireworks.
Mayor and Council, earlier this year, I think it was just before 4th of July, Council directed drafting of an ordinance to allow discharge of fireworks in Lennox. Discussed this at the June 10 council meeting. The Fire EMS Police Committee has discussed it, 2 separate meetings. And the result of those meetings is the ordinance in front of you today. It's been adjusted slightly to allow more discretion on the part of the fire department to suspend the discharge of fireworks in dry conditions. So that'd be suspended by the city administrator under recommendation of the fire chief. That would allow for more rapid response to changing weather conditions and wouldn't require council to hold a last-minute special meeting to suspend. The Lennox Fire Department, just to be clear, would still prefer the discharge not be permitted at all. But it's our understanding that discussion at the fire department included both pros and cons of that discussion.
So can you clarify, does this mean that I, as a citizen or individual, can come to the city hall and get a permit to shoot fireworks in my driveway? It says individual for public
Is that required? Or
fireworks
does this allow?
display.
We don't require a permit, no.
That's just for public displays that you
Right.
need a permit. So like
For
the
public,
commercial
yeah.
club would come get a permit to do a public display, or if another organization or individual wanted to do a public display, they would come
Correct,
get a permit.
correct.
So the discharge of any fireworks upon city-owned property, including city streets, may not occur without prior authorization by city council. So are we going to expect then some requests? Or I'm talking about individual residences wanting to shoot fireworks and just the way the language reads.
Well, as long as they're not on city property or on the street, then they're fine, right?
Correct.
So the way this is written, I could stand in my driveway and shoot fireworks.
Correct. They're on your property, as long as you're not past the sidewalk.
So I
1
can shoot
foot
large
to the
fireworks,
sidewalk.
bottle rockets. I just wanna make sure we're thinking of all possibilities that could come from the way the language reads. So there's no limitations on what type of fireworks could be shot from private property.
Did we say consumer
Consumer
fireworks?
fireworks.
Yeah.
So in the definition, first paragraph defined under South Dakota code.
And will we publish what that actually is, so people don't have to try and guess?
Go and look, right.
We can, but I don't know how they buy them without a license.
So anything you can go to the fireworks stand is permissible?
Yeah.
That's kinda why I'm clarifying, so
Those are all
really
consumer fireworks.
any type of firework I can get from the tent down the street
Yep.
is allowable in my driveway.
Assuming that that meets the definition, yes. And I-
Well, then it would, right? Because,
This
Yeah, I'm saying if a tent is selling
Able to sell.
other stuff,
yeah, but then they shouldn't be selling it. to
here's this
somebody
tannerite.
Without,
Want some?
without a permit though.
They should.
Correct.
They might have the permit though.
But I wouldn't, right? To be able to buy it.
Did we get any kind of feedback from Brett? Like, does this open us to any liability if Brittany shoots a firework and it lands on my roof and starts a fire?
I don't think that specific question was asked, no, but the ordinance was reviewed by Brett.
That's all homeowner policy, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
And could somebody say the city's responsible? They could make that argument, yes.
What was the, I know that the fire department group from the council met with the fire chief, right, and some members of the fire department. I'm just curious, was it like a unanimous, yes, we support this, or was there concern?
There was mostly concern from the fire department on cleanup and the proper disposal of the fireworks after the fact. They were concerned people would put it in trash cans and put them in their garage, or, you know, not put them out properly in water or whatever. So we had talked about providing like a public safety, you know, training or message in advance of these holidays to ensure that people understood the proper way to dispose, but that I felt like was the primary concern on the fire department's behalf. Chief Will Erickson was also there, and he didn't have, he said one way or the other, it didn't really impact the fire or the police department.
Would it be valuable to have maybe some community disposal bins that don't have plastic or trees in them that we put in certain places around town that are safe disposal sites during?
We talked about that a little bit, but that opens more liability.
That would definitely open
Yeah.
us up to some liability.
Okay.
Just be smart.
What led us
Fill
to,
it with water and dump it in there.
and some PSAs do go a long way.
Oh, yeah.
Just education is a big
Yeah.
thing. What led us to midnight as opposed to 11 PM?
Yeah, I'd have to consult with Will, but I think it was based on, I think we used the same time frame that T used. If I remember right.
And I think he said that a lot of the towns that we looked at were midnight as well.
Yeah.
'Cause I asked them too.
Is there any more granular weather stats that would dictate, yes, this year's okay, next year, this year it's not okay?
Yeah, there's a US drought monitor that we would rely on.
Okay.
That's updated weekly every week of the summer.
But that's also why we put the language in there that the fire department makes the recommendation versus us, so, because we realize like this week, I mean, we've had a red flag alert a lot lately, and so the weather can change in an instant, so we didn't want that to have to be a council decision to revoke that privilege.
If it's something that happens on, we could, let's say we're not necessarily in a drought, we get a red flag warning at 7 o'clock on July 3. You're gonna wanna suspend it, right? Or we're gonna wanna suspend it based on the fire chief's recommendation. I don't think I don't think we can call everybody in here at that hour.
Right.
No, most of us will probably be outside. I don't think we can call everybody in here at that hour and expect to do a meeting, so.
Was anybody from the police department present during the discussion?
Well,
Just chief.
Well,
Will was present. I'm curious how this conflicts with our ordinances on noise, and if we have residents who maybe aren't comfortable with this and they're submitting noise complaints. How will our police department handle that?
you can submit a noise complaint, but if it's something that's permitted under law, I don't think they could cite it. If it's discharged outside of the allowable hours, then you could.
It's 4 days out of the year. I mean, I understand, we do see that every year on Facebook, people concerned about their pets, their children,
I think when we
but
asked
we're
him
getting
that,
it regardless, I feel like,
in
so.
that July meeting or June meeting, I think he said there's really not that many complaints. There are some, but he didn't feel that any change would change that.
Right.
He didn't even think there would be many more
Right.
people doing it. Just
Right.
the same people are still doing, but they'll just be doing it.
It eases them trying to enforce it, then.
Right.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of rule followers that will do it now that it's allowed, and they didn't previously. Absolutely.
You will.
Yeah, we're gonna stand in the driveway and do little
Little hens.
fireworks, for sure.
Snaps.
Nothing that will reach your house, but.
Ooh,
Oh.
it's a fire hazard over there.
Right.
Any other questions or comments?
Thanks for your work on that from the committee that met with the fire department.
Okay, I'll look for a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance 651.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, or any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And motion carries. Okay, on to annexation study.
Mayor and council, you had asked for staff to study the possibility of annexing properties currently outside of our boundary but receiving municipal utilities. This is at the September 23 meeting. Since that time, we've identified the properties that this might apply to, highlighted on the map in the memo. And we've consulted with C County on performing annexation study. They have started working on that study. No word on how long that will take, although this is a fairly small area. So I really don't expect much. I'm hoping to update again at the November 11 meeting.
Is there a portion on the map towards the north that's cut off, or is that not part of,
It is, but we didn't have any properties up there that would qualify.
there's not a property?
So-
Okay.
Am I counting, is there about 11 properties?
11 properties.
There's currently not an action item on this, it's just for discussion.
Right.
So until we get, if there's no further discussion, we might have to wait till the study gets presented to us. But any other discussion, questions, comments on this?
And then just a reminder for myself too, if we were to move forward with potential annexation of these properties, the benefit to the city would be that they would be paying the surcharges on.
They already pay the surcharges, they pay the regular utility rates that anybody else would pay.
Okay.
The benefit would be that they would now be paying municipal property tax instead of the township property tax.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
How does that affect the resident, like as far as the tax? I'm just curious if the rate.
Is the levy about the same?
Yeah, I'd have to look at what the township levies are, they're not the same, it would be an increase. I wanna say maybe 4 mils per thousand.
Would you bring some of them in as rural service district?
I don't think any of these would qualify as rural service district, so I don't think any of them would stay the same.
What's our urgency, or what's our want to pursue this, so?
I don't know where it came from.
It was more of an interest, I guess, because there was questions about it. I don't know that there's an urgency by any means. The question was just raised in the community, and I wanted to have more information on it.
I think some of them have kind of been a long time coming,
Yeah,
some of the properties.
yeah, I mean, it's come up in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
There are properties that took action over the last decades that we were made aware of that have already had agreements in place that don't involve annexation, and I don't see them on this list, so I don't see it as a conflict with any of those that I'm aware of. Or are there any other outstanding judgments or decisions that were made in the past that?
I mean, we kind of abandoned the annexation deal a couple of years ago that Lincoln County brought to our attention.
Right.
So, I mean, you could go back, do a little bit deeper research on if those properties would still qualify. By and large, those would be rural service district and wouldn't change anything on their tax levy. When you look at, an annexation study is meant to look at whether properties have become urban or not. And one of the big characteristics that they look at are paved roads and utilities. There's others as well, but is this property behaving like it's a rural property or not? And so that's the kind of thing that an annexation study looks at.
So do these property owners, at what point are they made aware that we're even looking or researching annexation?
At whatever point we wish. I mean, if we decide, if the council were to decide to, we get the annexation study, the council says, okay, we want to move forward with this, then there's a formal notification procedure. And,
So they have an opportunity to come in
Of course.
and plead their case.
Of course.
Lauren, the questions that came up in the community, was it more, could you elaborate more on, was it a concern for us maybe not receiving those tax dollars, or was it that our neighbors are not annexed in the city, but they're right next to us? Was there specific?
I think it was just a general question as to why they get to have water, and are they paying all the
What
residents
everybody
are
else
paying
pays.
to receive that same service?
Sure, okay.
Do they not have to adhere to the ordinances? So that's another benefit that in their eyes, that they wouldn't have to have a pay surface to park their car or something along those lines.
Sure. Correct.
And vehicles on the property, all of that type of thing.
They're currently not subject to any of the city's ordinances or zoning or otherwise.
What would be the next step if we moved forward?
Bear with me a moment.
And is this part of kind of our master plan is to annex these properties. I guess what are we waiting for? If it's part of our master plan.
If, to answer your first question, if the next step, if you were to move forward with annexation, the city council would have to pass a resolution of intent to annex. There's a lot of requirements in there, I'm not gonna read through all of them here, but you have to make your intent to annex clear, and then you move through a specific process to do so. All the properties would of course be included in our comprehensive plan. So is there, there's never a legit, like, we need to go annex this property in that plan. This is the future land use, this is what we plan on doing in these areas. Should these properties be annexed into the municipal boundary.
So do other communities typically look at annexing a property if, let's say we would expand residential down 278th and Cleveland, and we were going to build residential property over there, then I understand how that makes sense to say, okay, now these properties need to be annexed in. I don't really see, I guess, much of a need to move forward with
Proactively do
it
it.
right
That's kinda what I mean,
now
it's like-
unless we're going to move in that area to expand residential. Then I guess it makes more sense to me.
So the direction we were given was to move forward with studying this issue. Do we no longer wish to do so?
I think we continue to study it.
What's that costing us?
Nothing. It's
Manpower.
a service of our agreement with CCOG.
So CCOG studies, I don't know.
Correct.
I think it's okay to understand
Yeah,
it and
helps us in the long run. Have some idea.
That's kind of where I was at with the next steps, is it more research? More studying?
what's the output of the study gonna tell us? Yes, it's
I think
feasible
there are
or no, it's not
requirements.
feasible?
I think there are requirements that they have to include. It says government bodies shall conduct a study to determine the need for contiguous territory and identify the resources necessary to extend municipal boundaries. So that's the only thing that state law says. I think Brandon did an annexation study not that long ago that I could certainly send to everyone so you can see what the final looks like, but that was a pretty comprehensive one. This is a much smaller.
I very much appreciate this being brought forward by community members and, you know, discussing, getting active in government and bringing things forward. However, I don't see the need to continue, and even though CCOG's time is free to us, it's not free to them, and so I don't foresee the need to continue moving forward. So if you need a motion on this, my motion would be to seize the annexation study.
Okay, we do have a motion to seize the annexation study. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. A motion and a second to cease annexation study. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we do have majority in favor of seizing annexation study, so the motion will carry. Okay. On to the next item, we have new business, Central Basin 4, project pay application number 15, Mitch.
Okay, pay application number 15 is in your packet. The contractor has reached substantial completion on the project, so we're actively doing our final inspections, getting them a punch list. This pay app gets them paid to date, as of September 27th, I guess. As you work down the right side, you can see we're retaining still 5.1% on the contract.
until all those punch list items are complete and to our satisfaction. In fact, that will probably retain some even through next year, because the seeding on this last phase will occur in the spring. So we probably won't be closing this contract out until that's done. But we recommend payment to them at this point, $465,098.40. Have you answered any questions?
Any questions for Mitch on this?
Motion approved, pay at 15.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll do roll call for this. Vandrill,
Aye.
Swear,
Aye.
Mauer,
Aye.
Doherty,
Aye.
Bowers.
Aye.
Welch.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. On to B, work order ash tree removal project. Is Mitch as well here?
Following completion of park and street assessments this year, we're ready to prepare a bid to remove trees in the park and on street boulevards. Stockholm has asked to prepare documents to administer the bid and oversee administration. Mitch estimates total compensation will be $8,000 or less. I recommend a motion to approve. Mitch can talk more if he has additional insurance.
Yeah, it's just simple hourly work order to be able to do that. A lot of the trees have been inventoried, so we delivered that to make a bid package out of and get in front of some contractors and collect some bids for you.
I know we had
There's
talked
a
about,
lot of interest in this project. I get calls and emails weekly.
we had talked in the past about potentially allowing citizens to piggyback on the contract to remove trees in there. Is it, what would that look like, or is that even feasible?
You could, I mean, I think what you would do is bid your work out to establish the unit prices, and then what we typically do is, then if someone, a neighbor, someone wants to, we'll put them in contact with that contractor, and they can work out an agreement on their own.
I'd like it, could it be a little more defined? Where it's not just an individual homeowner calling the contractor on their own and then hoping they got the good deal, and I'd like to kind of know the parameters of it, at least for our citizens, so they understand what they're looking at.
Sure, you know, the unit prices we could certainly make public to anybody. If you wanted to try to bring that work into your contract, which I might, recommend you don't do it that way.
Right.
That'd be the only alternative, is to bring the work onto your contractor for you. And then then you have to send a check to each homeowner.
Right, that doesn't sound feasible. I
Yeah.
just don't want it to be $300 for this guy and $3,000 for that person,
Yeah.
because they didn't ask the right question or.
And we've got a little bit of experience that with these other projects, typically with concrete. You know, if somebody wants to have their whole driveway done instead of just the approach, and so they'll work directly with the contractor. But they know what our unit price is on that project, and it's all public information, so it's not a problem for us to share that.
Good. Yeah, just a real ease for our residents is kind of a big deal. And again, not wondering what it might cost, having an idea.
The bigger item we run into a lot of times is, even though we have a unit price of a lot of trees, and it's probably gets it as cheap as it can be, you know, there will still be people that think they can do it cheaper, and that's usually what we run into, is they still think the price might be too high, and they'll try to find someone else to do it, so, that happens.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of folks are do it yourself.
And there's a difference, there's a difference with the trees sitting right on the boulevard, easy to access, and
Yeah.
smaller, and then there's one in the back that you gotta get a big, you know.
That's just it.
Haul out limbs by hand.
Right.
Yeah, if there's overhead power or underground, and
Yeah.
there's a lot to consider on each tree. Your trees with this contract will largely be in the right of way and in public areas that are more accessible. When you get into, you know, backyards and fences and all that sort of stuff, it just changes.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve the work order for the compensation.
okay, we have a motion and a second. This is also roll call, we'll go ahead and do that. Doherty,
Aye.
Welch.
Aye.
Bowers.
Aye.
Vandrill,
Aye.
Swear,
Aye.
Mauer.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. On to the batting cage proposal.
Mayor and council, Lennox Baseball and Softball Association is requesting funding from the city to improve the current batting cage facilities. Now the Little League fence has been completed, although the old post will need to be removed. LBSA is ready to pursue their next project, which is batting cages. There's a proposal in your packet from LBSA that was recommended for approval by the park board at their September meeting. LBSA is requesting $15,000 for the construction of the batting cages. It's not a budgeted expense for this year or next, so we really need to determine where such funding will be provided. General fund is doing well in terms of revenue, but of course we're seeing a slump in sales tax revenue. Project at this point, there's still a lot left in the year, but we're probably in the year pretty close to budget, if not a little bit over on revenue. We're already going to overspend our parks and rec budget this year, so we'll need a supplemental anyway. The other option is just to take it from second penny reserve. This is a pretty small amount, plenty available there. Using 15 from this fund would be minimally impactful for the goals of that fund. So I recommend a motion to approve with 15,000 from 212.
So, there's no match, correct? They said they don't have that fund right now.
I was gonna say, no, they're putting in,
25K if the math works.
yeah,
Where do you see that, Bill?
Their total option for batting cage is approximately 40K, they're asking us for 15.
Okay, so it is a match. I didn't see that, I apologize.
That's all right.
I'm not saying that the cages are not necessary. I'm just curious if they've done any kind of research on, you know, was the one we have now used significantly and we're overfull? And I know we do have challenges with scheduling every year. I just want to ensure that with this goes along with the rec position and ensuring that we are being equitable about softball, baseball, and usage and signing up in advance, and if someone just shows up, that they're exiting the facility if somebody else has it's scheduled. I think, I would just wanna make sure that as we're expanding into, new fields potentially and, batting cages, that we are scheduling appropriately to ensure that they're being used to the maximized use of the space. But also to make sure that we're equitable amongst all programs. And then my other question, that wasn't really a question statement, but my question is, where will they be placed, and will they come to us with a proposal and maybe some drawings before they're doing construction?
yeah, we've got to stake out a specific area yet, but it would be moved further to the northwest from where they are now, so into the area that,
So those will just go away?
I think those will eventually go away, yeah.
Why would they?
I was hoping they'd go in addition to.
Right.
Well, I don't think there's any plan to get rid of them at this point, but at some point, they're going to be
Because I'm not sure I wanna approve this if we're not gonna keep what we got, because I think that's the need, is we need more batting cages.
Right, that was always a struggle.
What would be
I think
the
the
reason?
ones there need to be patched up as far as holes in the net and stuff.
So is that the issue, is just the upkeep of the one that's there? I mean, why would we get rid of it, I guess?
Well, I thought this was an expansion, just like Sam was saying.
Right.
If this isn't an expansion of the existing setup, what are we looking at here?
Is there room there to put
Yeah,
3 more? Is it 3 more?
I think.
In its current spot, but if it moves north and west, you're now in the outfield of the little field.
Yeah, that's
Right?
what I don't quite understand.
I think they did they put a fence in there? Yeah, they did. I think they
There's
put
a
a
fence,
fence in there now, so that is not outfield anymore.
Okay,
So
So
between,
you can
you're
actually
talking
get a home run.
between the,
Yeah. Cool.
you're talking between the middle field, outfield, and the big field. Between there's,
Well, kind of the center.
No, it's like right field and center field and the middle field. They put a fence out there now, so it's like Little League standards
Yeah,
fence,
it's
right?
moved in by, I can't tell you how many feet, but
so is that where the batting cages would essentially go, is between the middle field and the big field?
correct.
Yeah, that's where they were talking. We need
so.
I've asked Sailor just to see if I can get a quick answer on
Here?
it.
Yeah.
As far as I know, they keep these as long as they possibly can, but at some point, things fall apart.
Well, what's the upkeep of the netting? I mean, you have the concrete there already.
The netting, that's what costs money over time.
But I think buying a net versus totally moving where they're at, just because the net's shot doesn't make any sense.
No, that doesn't make any sense, no.
Can you put your parcel browser up on the screen?
I mean, just an idea too, we could approve the funding pending some of
Approval of
those
site.
details.
Yeah,
Because I know they really spent a lot of time, I was at the park board meeting when they were talking about this too, they spent a lot of time researching and talking about it and on all those answers that you guys are talking about too. Even multiple bids.
yeah, I'm all about an expansion.
And there's a lot of volunteer hours
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
such in here that,
Right.
there's definitely a lot of good,
Yeah,
but it'd be nice to know the drawing.
sure.
And we already have the concrete there and
Right.
the frame, just buy
Yeah,
a
yeah.
new net and keep that.
Right.
While we're at it, let's request another $1,000 from you too.
Well,
This thing is,
I was like,
It's-
oh, that's an expensive
You know
TV.
yeah, but everybody's gonna be able to see
Maybe
it.
buy one
I
on
can
Black
say,
Friday.
$16,000 TV. You can draw on it.
I'm not having any luck. So, if you look at parcel browser, where the current one is situated, it goes from southeast to northwest. This one would be, I believe, situated southwest and northeast along the outside fence of the middle field.
So,
Yes,
as
they
we,
would keep the one that's there now.
as we look at expanding, in our fields in future use and now batting cages, and the high school has their baseball program that I believe is going to be sanctioned, correct? If anybody correct me if that's accurate or not,
I don't think that's accurate.
that it will not be.
I don't believe so,
Okay.
but
Do
I
you
don't know so.
That was on last night's. I'm
Not
sure.
yet, I think it's in the works.
So if that, I'm just thinking for future, so if the baseball program essentially or eventually gets added on as a program with the high school and then softball as well, not just the batting cages, but for future softball fields, baseball fields, do we need to look at starting to do some shared funding with the school district? I mean, we did not for the tennis courts because they're moving those to the high school for high school use, but I support the baseball program and the softball program, using the batting cages, using the fields, but we also have to look at funding for those programs, and if they are going to be supported by the school, I think that we should approach them for partial payment on this.
Or do we bring that into our usage contract with them when they need a field to play baseball on, sanctioned baseball?
That they're paying for it,
Right, that it's a part of,
rather than paying for new.
Right now, our policy right now is if it's a organized team from within the school district, that there's no fee.
Right.
Whether that's city use or otherwise.
So Brittany's question is valid. Do we need to look at some additional
Cost
funding?
sharing.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
And I know this is only 15,000, but when we eventually do a new field,
Right,
it's gonna be significant expense, that's a shared use.
right.
So I mean, we want them to be able to use the batting cages, and I know right now there's, with only having one, there's limited availability, and when you have fall softball, you got spring softball, you got high school baseball, I mean, everybody's wanting to get in there. And then if you have some little league teams that are trying to get ready for the season or getting ready for the tournaments, and they can't get in there, they're what we are making these for, more so than outside teams,
Right.
as they would call them teams, I guess. So I think it makes sense to approach them for some sort of cost sharing, whether that's half and half, or if it's a third, or
Right,
what.
5K kicker.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Bill, on potentially moving towards, charging for those facilities, but then is it gonna be enough, you know, to
Right.
offset the cost of building? Could we move forward for LBSA's sake with the 15,000, potentially approving that, and then still approach the school for percentage of reimbursement, or, and then future?
You could, but at that, and there's no pressure on them to approve it at that point.
Or is this the time you do that, or when you actually build the field, that's the time?
When is this, when are they looking to do, not this fall yet?
They'd like to
They'd
do it
like-
this fall, yeah. Of course, you gotta wait for weather, I mean, as soon as weather holds long enough for concrete.
Well, as far as that goes, they have the funding to get that started. You know, I mean, they could pay for the concrete.
Just to get the concrete down.
Yeah.
But if they don't have any assurance we're gonna chip in, then we'll have a couple
Nate,
foursquare.
what's our facility use agreement with the school for the use of the new tennis? Do we have something like that?
We don't have
right now?
anything right now, no.
Okay.
We probably need to get one in place for, we have a facility use agreement for other uses, you know, the summer rec program where, you know, we used, the music rooms, for example, for the summer, I can't remember what we called it, summer rec. I think we had an indoor use agreement, for weather days during that program as well. So, you know, we've got a facility use agreement for certain uses, they've got a facility use agreement with us for certain uses as they come up.
Are there any costs to those current facility use? See, and that's where I think, I mean, all of these, they could make the argument that all of these facilities have wear and tear and update needs, so I think if we're opening that door, it could bleed into other facility use agreements, and we could be shooting ourselves in the foot. I see your point, but also LBSA is sharing the cost with us on some of these things too, so that's just.
They are, but I mean, that's funding that we used to get. I mean, we kind of, in some sense, gave that to them, that opportunity. You know, we used to do these upgrades based on what we brought in from the concession stands. We turned that over to them, basically, so now they are able to capture those funds and do with it what they like.
The concession stands?
Yeah.
We haven't turned over the concession stands.
But
Well,
like
big field we
registration
do, right?
fees and stuff.
We don't need the big
No.
deal.
Everything comes back to
That's right, they turned that down.
Yeah.
But yeah, all the fees and stuff.
fundraising is something we don't do much of anymore outside the
We're
sponsorships.
turning
So that's what
like a lot of the
LBSA
tunes
raises.
over to the Legion program. I mean, that, I'm sure feeds right into that.
I would have been.
So, I don't know.
I see that there's a proposal for tomorrow night to recommend removal of all travel teams. I think we've projected over many years that our numbers would go down significantly without travel teams. Does that play into this discussion at all for the need if we have reduced numbers in our programs?
We had not done a projection on what
I think
not
it's,
having tournament teams would do to our.
I think it's just been a projection based on what happens in other communities when they forego the travel teams and then they lose the rec team kids to other programs.
What's the current process for reserving the batting cages?
I'd have to check with Greg.
I guess
I'm not sure if coaches communicate between each
Yeah,
other.
right, I guess where I said, I think I'm in support of approving the 15,000, let's get these made, but I wanna make sure it's accessible to everybody, that, you know, it's easy, you don't need to know somebody to get on the list to be able to get, you know.
The impression I got is accessible, it just takes some organization,
Yeah.
and people need to reserve times, and there's a demand for it, so,
Mhm.
yeah, that's the impression I got.
We used to have like a live document that you went on and reserved. Like an,
Yeah, I don't know what the process is now.
I know it's changed and I don't know, cause I haven't had to deal
Right,
with it.
we always did it live,
But it was easy.
real easy.
You went on and you knew if it was booked or not.
I'd like to have it on the app, actually, would be ideal, so coaches could
Yeah,
look
you
and
could
book
see
and double check. I mean, if you have 2:30 in the afternoon and you've got, a break and you can call kids over to the cage. It'd be
So
nice to know
that-
if it's available.
That software was Sports Plus, it's what we used before
Yeah.
Sports Engine, and we went away with it, it was $300 a year. My recommendation is that we have that on top of our Sports Engine, because Sports Engine does not have that capability.
But I think even before that, we just had like a live Excel.
Like Google Doc or.
Yeah, and a Google Doc could work the same, but it takes somebody to manage it and manage it well.
I didn't get any impression that that was a problem from the coaches at the park board.
I thought I heard there's been some issues with that. kind of
Could be.
stuff with Fields and.
It didn't come up at
But I
that
don't,
meeting.
yeah.
I
don't have any
hear that quite a
Firsthand
bit.
knowledge.
I hear that quite a bit, that, it's usually a text conversation, hey, can I
Right.
use the batting cage on this day? And I think some of that organization gets maybe lost in translation, and so there's quite a bit of overlap.
Sure.
Or people will show up and they don't really have it reserved, or there's an assumption that, well, if I have a game, I get it the 2 hours before, rather than actually reserving, and so there needs to be a live document of some kind. Google Docs would be fine, but the Sports Plus system, what was really nice about it is if I was in the batting cage and Sam tried to go in there and add it, it would alert him and say, Mauer 8U is in the batting cage from this
Sure.
time. And then he could call me and say, hey, could you move to 7? I see that's open, or whatever. Oh yeah, sure, I'll move for baseball. But yeah, if we had a system like that, I think that would make the recreation manager's life much easier.
Sure.
Is that something the rec manager would manage, please?
I think so, but it was really coach driven too, which was nice, that they could go on and they didn't have to call the rec manager, they could just.
Right,
log on and do it.
but the rec manager would be responsible for setting up that process.
Yes, I think so.
So the batting cages are pretty busy, they're needed.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion to approve the 15,000.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't, if it's too windy or something, you can't get on the field, or it's wet, you can always go in the batting cages. I mean, it's good use.
Or when the fields are all booked.
Right.
We do full practices at the
Yep.
batting cage
Yep.
for an hour.
Okay, we have a motion from Welch to Swear, was that second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I'd like to add, if we could somehow make that motion based on knowing that the current cage will stay put, that we're not gonna
I think he
demolish.
confirmed it.
Yeah, he confirmed.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Continue.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we'll do roll call for this. Swear.
Aye.
Bowers.
Aye.
Vandrum.
I,
Doherty.
Aye.
Welch.
Aye.
Mauer.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. On to next item, rubble site fees.
Mayor and Council, Alderman Doherty and Bowers requested this item A added to today's agenda for discussion and possible action. The current fees for the Rebel site are $25 a year for residential use, $100 for commercial. Through August, that's generated $3,175 in revenue. Expenses to manage the Rebel site vary. We're required to inspect the site daily and remove any unauthorized materials, and we need to regularly move material with front end loader, like pushing branches back, turning over the mulch or the compost, those kinds of things. Recurring costs include expenses operating the surveillance system, which is, so far this year, $630. That included some upgrades early this spring, so that's not necessarily our subscription cost. I did draft an amended schedule of fees that eliminates all fees for use of the Rebel site tonight for potential action.
So Doherty and Bowers, were you kind of thinking that this would just be something we offer to the community as a free service? That
Yes.
they're able to utilize the Rebel site and not have to come down to City Hall and get a Rebel site pass, which I know that every year that's my issue, is just making that trip.
Yeah.
I forget if I did it or not.
It's a service available to our residents.
Would it be just city residents?
Yep.
And then how do you,
How do we monitor that?
how do we,
surveillance system, right? I mean, you just said we have our surveillance system out there.
but,
You'd have to have somebody.
Monitor it.
I mean, it'd be kind of the honor
We don't-
system, but if we get a habitual offender, we could take action, but it's not something we're gonna lose sleep over.
Yeah,
This
Bill
is
called
just-
me and I let Nate know I wanted a number two. I mean, mine was more for information and to kind of see what we do make on it and make a decision based on that, I guess. I didn't have any strong feelings one way or the other, but
Do we have a lot of issues with people dumping things other than branches and leaves and stuff out there?
We charge probably once a year for a criminal statute violation.
So that's why we have the surveillance primarily,
Right.
is to ensure people aren't dumping the wrong stuff.
Correct.
That's
That
a
was,
healthy fine.
you know, we're the only, community I know of that has done this. And part of the reason DNR okayed it at the time, because we were going to have 24-hour day cameras running. So if somebody does dump out there with unauthorized use, we can go after them, and at least once a year we have.
Will this affect at all our collaboration with the dump site? We have something in place now, right, where we get like reduced pass?
Oh, not gonna change anything.
Okay.
How long have we had the fee in place?
2 or 3 years.
My guess is forever, as long as the whole site's been around.
But we used to have a like somebody was hired to sit
Yeah,
there,
we'd have somebody out there.
Yeah,
and that was part of that funding.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
you're right.
we did away with that in 2019, does that sound, after 19.
It's been a couple of years.
You know, we had that for we had an employee out there for my first year here, my first summer here, and I think that was it. Then we moved to the camera system.
This,
Right, the intent here is to try and keep Lennox clean and have folks have easy access to get rid of their leaves. Leaves are falling, limbs need trimming, and if it's a pain in the butt to go buy a permit, people may break the law, and to me, that's silly. When we want you to clean your yard, we want you to throw away your leaves properly, and having access to this, I think would be wonderful, just not having to go get a permit.
But when you are working on your yard, it's typically going to be when we're closed,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah,
whether it's an evening or a weekend, and you're not gonna have a chance to get a permit at that point, so.
I think this is a nice service we do for our
And
community.
it's not a significant amount of revenue that we'd
No.
be missing out on. I mean, 3,175, if that's just residents, that's only 127 residents are getting passes. So, I mean, that's not even close to the whole thing. I think opening it up is gonna make it more accessible to everyone.
I think we'll need to monitor commercial, just to make sure that we don't have,
Tons
you know,
of
tree services from
other towns.
Centerville or
Why
some
not,
other town.
why not
dumping.
just offer the free to residential?
Right.
Yeah.
That might be a way
I
to
think it
revise
should be.
it so that it's not
Sounds
abused.
reasonable.
yeah,
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Mhm.
I think the biggest thing we'll have to watch is when it's wet. I don't know if we close it then.
We have, but it's usually not in that, I mean, we closed it for several days during the flooding, but
Cause it gets pretty soft in there.
How much
You
of
can't.
that 3175 is commercial, do you know, approximately?
we could go back and see what the deposit.
You don't have to do that, I'm just curious if we have
It's not much.
three commercial, businesses that use it, or?
I don't think any.
Yeah, okay, no. Then I agree with Swear, I'll make a motion to, I guess, I don't-
Remove.
Where is
Approve
it at?
It would be approve the resolution.
approve
as
the
amended.
resolution as amended.
2024-9-2301.
Do we wanna
Right
put
thing.
a speculation on, or a condition on there that it cannot be used for commercial?
Well, the amendment would be that it's removing the fee for residential only.
Okay.
We keep the commercial, so we'll redraft that now, or that resolution before you sign it.
Okay. Has, one other question though, has anyone paid for this pass in the last month or two?
We had a guy this morning that was going to, and we said, maybe just hold off a little bit.
Okay.
We do have at least one commercial, I know.
One, okay.
Okay. But yeah, if there's any other residential within the last month or 60 days, I would feel okay to refund them too.
Yeah.
That would be,
30 days for sure. That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, the amended date, or the date on this.
Yeah, it was
is
9/23.
September 23rd, so if we could just look if there
Go
was
back
anybody
to-
in that
Yeah.
time frame.
That's fine.
We'll go back through, maybe through September.
Was my motion
That's an easy-
okay, or do I need to
we're
say
fine.
that?
okay, so we have a motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And then we have a new agenda item here, extension for the rec manager.
And Mayor and Council, this is just to keep our current recreation manager in that role for the foreseeable future to help plan through, the fall inventory stuff, the getting baseball and softball ready in January. Given where discussions are at right now, I don't know what that position's going to look like yet, and there's still stuff that needs to happen. So, if everybody's okay with it, I'd recommend that we just continue that employment in place until a future date to be determined.
Should we go into exec for personnel?
Is he okay with that?
Yes,
That's what I was gonna
yeah.
ask too.
I'd like to go into exec for personnel.
Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Now declares an exec at 8:13 PM.
Have a good night, guys.
Thanks, Art.
See ya.